Discussing our biotech index, recalibrating why are we invested, what are our expectations, and also why did we have a drawdown in particular in the biotech stocks year to date. This is the Not Even Wrong podcast. It's May 6, 2021. This is Krim Delco. Since the last update, May 4th, we are down 2.5%. The market is up roughly 90 basis points. We are now down 9.9% for the year. The market's up 11%. We're underperforming by almost 21%. This is one of the higher underperformance measures we had this year, higher ever since we actually started this podcast series. We have never been underperforming by this much. So I think it warrants a little bit of a revisiting. What is it we're doing? Why are we doing what we're doing? What are our goals? And I want to talk in particular about the biotech index today, not about Tesla. I think I spend a lot of time talking about Tesla, and although Tesla has also contributed to our drawdown, it is actually the biotech index which hurts us a lot more. For the year, we are down 6.1% on the biotech, 3.5% on Tesla. RTX is flat. Intel is down 20 basis points. So the main contribution to the downward pressure we have comes actually from the biotech. So let's talk about what is it we're trying to do. Why are we invested in this biotech index? First, the stocks we're invested in are not in the same business. We have CRISPR companies, CRISPR Therapeutics, Editas, Intellia. We have Beam Therapeutics, which is base editing, so it's a little bit, let's say, the next level of CRISPR technology. We have Twist Bioscience, which is a synthetic biotech company. We have Pacific Bioscience, excuse me, which is in the genomic sequencing business, and Fate Therapeutics is cell therapy. I'm going to go individually explain what the companies do and why we're invested. But before I do that, I want to give the overarching thesis here. The overarching thesis is digitizing life science. Before the genomic editing business started taking off, okay, genomic editing has been around even before CRISPR. We had zinc fingers and other talents. The problem with that is it was very expensive, very difficult, very cumbersome, and more importantly, it took a long time, so you couldn't experiment and iterate. It is one of the fundamental theses of our fund, is that we invest in fundamentally new concepts and engineering practices with large impact. We believe that you can only have large impact if you can iterate and if the cost of iteration is relatively low. And this is exactly where CRISPR technology comes in, or synthetic bio in general. It is exactly that kind of, let's say, beautiful combination of having low cost of iteration and the new technology that can be applied. So before this, in particular CRISPR, but in general, genetic modification and understanding came to the platform and became a business and became proliferated throughout the business world. Life science was a bespoke science. It was bespoke. It was try and error. It was hope for the best, invest a lot, a little bit like advertising. You don't know what works, but if you invest a lot, something will work. Digitizing life science means that is changing now. We are softwareizing life science. So we're becoming much more of a deterministic, algorithmic nature. The culture of life science is changing into more algorithmic, in a sense that we understand what we want. We build an algorithm. We engineer cells or engineer delivery mechanisms to change the genome in certain cell types, and therefore we cure diseases. So we can predict pretty well what's going to happen. And the problems are much more engineering problems. For example, in the CRISPR space, delivery is a problem, which is an engineering problem. So we know if we can actually deliver the CRISPR technology to the cell, let's say to the liver cell or to the eye, then we can actually change the genes, and that will have huge impact on the patient's health. But we don't know how to deliver it, and that's an engineering problem. So there are a couple of things. One is certain types of viruses which can be used. The other is lipid nanoparticles, which are kind of like little fat blobs that get into your bloodstream and deliver the CRISPR technology wherever it's needed. So I think this is the fundamental thesis. Digitizing life science means that the science is becoming more deterministic. Therefore, business applications can be developed engineering practices can be used. We have more of a softwareizing of the business, algorithmatizing of the business, to use Ben Horowitz's ideas of his latest book, where he talks about the necessity to think about any kind of business like a software business. So it's not just software is eating the world in terms of actual software, but it's also the culture of businesses is becoming much more softwareized. What that means is that we have deterministic, clear algorithms that are either written explicitly or at least implicitly implied onto the business world, and then we have the, let's say, try and error, the debugging, we have the collaboration through open source, all these things that software has, in particular the debugging. So when you, let's say, write software, you write it in a way that it can be debugged easily. So imagine now you're developing a certain pharmaceutical using CRISPR. You're also going to think about how do you debug, let's say, the process in case something goes wrong. So similar ideas, similar thinking, and because the underlying technology allows that. So now I'm going to go separately. Again, our index is 7 companies, but they're not all the same. So let me go through each one of them. And I want to bundle 4 of them together, which is CRISPR Therapeutics, Editas, Intellia, and Beam Therapeutics, because they're all similar in the sense that they're using CRISPR, or in the case of Beam, base editing, which is an advanced version of genome editing using similar ideas of CRISPR, but not having to cleave the DNA and then hoping that the cell mechanism recombinates it. You can do that by intelligent chemistry without the cleavage of the DNA. So it's a little bit easier, a little bit faster, a little bit less messy. Those 4 companies are in the business of using gene editing, the latest gene editing technologies, to edit genes and solve medical problems. This is what they do. They are in the FDA approval process cycle. They are collaborating with large pharmaceutical companies like Vertex and Roche and Pfizer, etc. The idea here is that you have certain diseases like sickle cell disease, beta thalassemia, you have ocular diseases, you have liver diseases, and so on and so forth, many more diseases that you can attack by changing certain genes, because we know that those diseases have certain gene mutations as an underlying cause. I think the next level here is that we start developing ideas. Let's say, to paraphrase David Liu in one of his latest interviews with Guidepost, he said that the great thing about this whole CRISPR space is that we noticed that if we, let's say, there are maybe 100 genes which are mutated, and we can, by changing only 20 to 30% of those genes, we can already get great results for the patient. This is a huge advance, and this proliferates the space in the pharmaceutical world much faster. So this is, I think, a very exciting part of our portfolio. We are not your typical FDA approval type investor, but given that the underlying technology here can be used to actually solve medical problems and pharmaceutical problems, we don't mind being invested in this space. Twist Bioscience is a synthetic bio company. What they specifically do is synthetic DNA, for example. They use that to make things that need DNA, such as one of their largest clients is Ginkgo, which is using a DNA to make, let's say, perfume and things like that, tastes. So instead of using roses and pressing them and using the smell of roses, you just use the actual genes that in the rose that express the smell, and you synthetically make the smell of the rose. So this is one of the uses of synthetic bioscience, synthetic biology. Twist is also in the business of using their synthetic DNA technology to develop antibodies to attack certain diseases. Again, here, high throughput, high iteration, low cost of iteration, the possibility to go through many, like they call libraries of possible antibodies, and then use the ones that work and then attack them by either solving medical problems or licensing the technology. Another problem, another business that Twist Bioscience is in is actually DNA storage, which is phenomenal. That is the possibility to store long-term, low-cost data. This is for very cold storage, so storage that, let's say, data that needs to be stored, things like register, law stuff. I mean, very old stuff that nobody really checks, but it has to be stored somewhere for at least 30 to 50 years. that kind of stuff. It's the low-hanging fruit. I think DNA storage can be a much more lucrative business, but right now we're still very high on the cost curve relative to other storage technology, and therefore we need some time. But this could be in itself a multi-hundred-billion-dollar business. So Twist Bioscience again is using. This is not a CRISPR company. This is a synthetic bio company, but it is sort of in the same realm. Pacific Bioscience is one of the most exciting companies we have. It's now the largest position because also the stock has done very well. What Pacific Bioscience does is genome sequencing, but they're doing it differently than the market leader Illumina. They're doing long reads. Long reads have been more expensive and less accurate in the past. Now they're becoming cheaper and more accurate, and they have a lot of advantages. For example, you can detect much more interesting information if you do long reads. You can attack certain diseases much faster, and there's just much more potential. This is a classical disruption in a sense that they're coming from a place that is very different than what Illumina is doing. They were high cost and low accuracy, and now they're slowly improving the accuracy and lowering the cost, and they're taking over the market of Illumina. So we believe that actually Pacific Bioscience has the potential to become even bigger than Illumina and take over this market. Right now, there's no antitrust issues, but we believe that at some point it can become as big that like Illumina is now and become actually an antitrust problem. But for now, most importantly, this is a huge potential for us in terms of just continuing with genome sequencing and developing that technology and become much better, because all this whole digitizing life science makes no sense if you cannot read the genome, and Pacific Bioscience is the market leader in a new type of application for genome sequencing, which we believe is very promising. Lastly, but not least, of course, Fate Therapeutics. What Fate Therapeutics does is cell therapy, but here's what they do. They do allogenic cell therapy. So that means that if you have an illness that needs modified cells to be cured, that can be done today. The way it's done, they take your own cells, they then modify them, put them back into your body. It takes a long time, it's very expensive, it's very cumbersome. What Fate Therapeutic is doing is they're basically building off-the-shelf cells that can be used from third-party donors and put in your body and fix your disease. This is still a dream, it's a vision. If that works, the cost can be down by orders of magnitude. The speed can be increased. You can also try much faster. Again, faster iteration, lower cost of iteration, much more exciting. So Fate Therapeutics is in this business. That's why it's called Fate, meaning one cell, several fates. The cell can do this or that. There is certain technologies, Nobel Prize winning technologies, such as, for example, turning any cell into a stem cell and then program it back and let's say make it a healthy liver cell or a kidney cell. Those are still visionary ideas, but the company is using certain type of applications already in real pharmaceutical type situations, and we believe that Fate Therapeutics has the potential to become the largest pharma company in the world if they succeed with their idea. Again, here we have lower cost, higher throughput, higher volume, and more effectiveness, which is really what we're after when it comes to any investment, in particular when it comes to these healthcare type investments. So to summarize, our biotech index is in a very big picture way, it is digitizing life science, making it more algorithmic. In a business way, it is making it lower cost, higher iteration, lower cost of iteration, more disruption, more penetration in the market, faster, more volume, more learning, going up the learning curve, compound the learning, and therefore taking over the current bespoke type of pharmaceutical, medical, and life science space that we have been living with for the last few decades. And we believe that there's enormous potential here. The stocks have not done well this year, to some extent also because they've run up a lot last year, but I think also because there are some doubts in terms of, okay, how far can this go? This is still very new science fiction. There's some breakthroughs that need to happen also, let's say with FDA approvals and drug approvals. They are happening. The companies are on track, sometimes a little faster, sometimes a little slower. Fate Therapeutics has had success with their cell therapies. All these things are on track. Of course, there is risk, there is execution risk. We're okay with that risk because we know that in the end, it's either going to work and it's going to be huge, or if it's not going to work, at least we can learn and hopefully come up with better technologies to fix the problems that were the cause for this not working. So we believe that we can have outsized returns with this biotech index, and that this recent sell-off and our 6% year-to-date loss in the portfolio are unfortunate, but they are part of the life of a hedge fund, which is I keep saying that the purpose of this hedge fund, of this, excuse me, of this podcast is to give people a sense for what it feels like to run a hedge fund. Well, sometimes you run up and then you consolidate and then it comes back. You have certain good news in some of these companies, and then the whole space can take off again and deliver the returns that we expect. Thank you.